Hi everyone, welcome to the week of July 20th through the 24th. We are going to be finishing up our unit on compare and contrast this week, and we're going to be doing that by looking at the branches of government, specifically at one branch, and we're going to compare and contrast the pieces inside of that branch. So we know that when we compare things, we are looking for the similarities. So we use transition words like both or similar to show that they're the same. And we know that when we look at contrast, we're looking at how things are different from each other. So we use words like however and although to show that those things are different. So for today's lesson, you're going to want to make sure that you have a pencil and paper with you. That's all we're going to need today. So if you need to go get it, I'd like for you to pause the video and make sure that you have pencil and paper with you. Once you have your pencil and paper, we're going to continue on. And what I'd like for you to do is draw this chart on your paper. This is called a KWL chart. And what it stands for is what I know, K, what I want to know, W, and what I've learned, L. So our topic today, like I said earlier, is the branches of government. This is something that we should all be familiar with, but it can be a little complicated if we're not used to it. So as you're drawing your chart out, what I want you to think about is, what do I know? So what are some things that I've heard before? What are some words that I may know that are associated with the government? Maybe I know some people that are in the government. Those are some things that we want to put down in that what do I know column. And if you don't have anything to put in that column, that's okay, because we all have to start from somewhere. So it is okay if you don't have anything in the what I know column. After you fill out what you know column, we're going to move to the what I want to know. So these are the questions that you have about the branches of government. Maybe things like, what does it mean? What do I want to learn? How can I apply it? So I made a chart that's pretty simple, but it's going to show that I don't really know anything about the branches of government, and what I want to learn is everything. So my KWL chart, in the column for what I know, I haven't put anything because I don't really know anything. But for what I want to learn, I wrote down everything because I want to know everything about the branches of government and what I can learn from them. So what I'd like for you to do is I want you to take a minute and I want you to fill out your first two columns for your KWL chart, what I know and what I want to know. Go ahead and pause the video and take some time if you need it. Once you've finished these two spots in your KWL chart, we're going to go ahead and get started. The spot for what I learned at the end, this is where we're going to take our notes. So this is a good place to write down any information that you want to keep from today so that you have it in one specific place. We'll be able to find it easily under branches of government. And we'll be able to look under the what I learned column. So that's a good place to put down any notes that you have. All right, so let's get started. The three branches of government. When I hear branch, I think of trees, and that's a good way to think about our branches of government. We have one government, but there are lots of branches that come out from it. There are three branches that we talk about when we talk about the United States government. There is the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. So I want you to take a minute. Have you heard of these words before? Have you heard of words that are similar to these words? Because one that stands out to me, I think of this word judicial. Whenever I see this word, I think of judge. So even if I'm not sure what these branches do, I may be able to figure out or make a good guess for them just by the words alone. But I've also got this picture here to help me. Remember that as we read, it's just as important to look at any visuals or graphics that are given to you as it is to actually do the reading. Graphics, visuals, charts, diagrams, they're all there to help you become a better reader, to help you understand something. So what I noticed in this chart here is I noticed my three branches, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. But I also noticed that's telling me a little bit more about each of these specific areas. So for example, underneath the legislative branch, I see the US Capitol, and then I see these arrows leading to Congress, and then the arrows that lead to the House of Representatives and to the Senate. We're going to dive a little deeper into these pictures when we talk about each branch of government on its own. So we're going to start by looking at the legislative branch. So we want to say, what do they do? What is the job of the legislative branch? So have we ever heard of words that sound like legislative? Well, I maybe think of legislate, but that's about it. I can't think of another word that really reminds me of legislative. So what do? The job of the legislative branch is to make the laws. They are housed in the U.S. Capitol building, and that's what this building here is on our diagram. And the legislative branch is made up of Congress. So Congress is the full name for the two houses of Congress. So Congress is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. So you may have heard of these recently in the news. There's been a lot of talk of whether or not the House is going to vote on something or the Senate is going to vote on something, especially when we're talking about the coronavirus. There are a lot of relief packages that the government can pass, but they have to come from the House of Representatives and the Senate. Since they are creating a law to help Americans, it belongs in the legislative branch because the job of the legislative branch is to make the laws. So that's the one key thing we want to remember about the legislative branch is that they make the laws. So on your KWL chart, if you're only going to write down one thing, we want to write down that the legislative branch is in charge of making the laws. That's our most important thing. Our second branch of government is the executive branch. So when we think of executive, I think of a really important person in charge of something, maybe a CEO or someone who executes something. That's that word that I think of when I hear executive branch. When we look at our diagram here, we see the White House. I know my picture's a little in the way here, but the White House is a good clue for who is in the executive branch. So we want to think, who lives in the White House? The president. So the executive branch is made up of the president and the vice president. And what we don't see here are all the other departments that are involved in the executive branch. So the reason that the executive branch needs a whole bunch of departments is because it is their job to carry out the laws. You're going to execute something. You're going to do it. So it is the job of the executive branch and the president to make sure that the laws the legislative branch creates are carried out and enforced correctly. So let's think about something to do with education. Let's say that there is a new law that is passed that says children need to stay in school until they're 20. It would be the job of the executive department to make sure that happened. Now, the president, that's not really his job to do it. So what we have are lots of departments to make sure that the government runs smoothly. If it's an education department, if it's an education issue, it would belong to the Department of Education. We also have other departments like the Department of Homeland Security. We have the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and there are many, many, many other departments. The executive branch is actually the largest portion of the federal government, even though when we think about it, we really only think about the president. He's only the figurehead of that department. There are so many other people that make the government work within the executive branch. And like I said, it's their job to carry out the laws. So they're making sure that the laws that are created are being followed and can be followed. So on our KWL chart, if we want to remember nothing else, we want to remember that the executive branch carries out the laws. That's their job. They execute the laws. The last branch of government that we have is the judicial branch. So I said earlier that when I think of judicial branch, I hear that word judge. So when I think of a judge, I think of a person who presides over a court, who decides whether or not a person did something right or wrong. I think of juries. So I think we're in the right place when we think of the judicial branch as the judges of the government. Our building here shows us the Supreme Court, and the judicial branch is made up of the Supreme Court and all of the lower courts. So any type of circuit court, your state courts, they're all part of your judicial branch. And when we think of judicial branch, it is their job to evaluate the laws. When we evaluate something, we decide if it is good or bad, and it helps us to see whether or not we want to choose something. The judicial branch evaluates laws to see if they are constitutional. That's my second little spot here. When we decide if a law is constitutional, what the Supreme Court is doing is they are reading a law and deciding whether or not that law matches the spirit of the American Constitution. So it's their job to say, is this law a good law? Is this valid? Is this something that the American people can live by and works with the values of America as a country? So their job is to evaluate. On your KWL chart, we want to say that the judicial branch evaluates the laws and decides if the laws are constitutional. All right, so now that we've talked about the three branches of government, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, we're going to talk about why we have three branches of government. So why do they work together and why do we have them? So I'm going to move my little video here so you can see a little better. So our government uses a system of checks and balances to keep things running and to ensure that no one branch of government becomes too powerful. When we think about why America was founded, we used to be a colony of Great Britain. But in the 1700s, the American people decided that they didn't like the representation that was happening. They didn't like that they had a king and that no one was listening to them. So when we went through the American Revolution and after, when we created the Constitution, the Founding Fathers created a way to make sure that no one branch of government became too powerful, that no one person became a king again, because the point of going through that revolution was to say that everyone's voice gets heard and everyone is allowed to have a say in the government. Excuse me. So what they created was what's called a system of checks and balances. So let's talk about those two words for a minute. When something balances, it means it's kind of equal. It evens out. So when you balance a checkbook, you make sure that the deposits match the outgoing money. Everything has to balance itself out. We also can think of a teeter-totter. When you sit on one end of a teeter-totter, the other end goes up. So it has to balance if you want to stay equal. When you check something, it's something that you do to stop something or to make sure that something isn't happening that's detrimental. So when I think of checks and balances, I found this picture that I really liked. So when we think of checks and balances, we want to think that the person with the green decided to do something. That's their thing. They said, okay, I think that every American in the United States has a monkey. They should have a monkey. So I'm going to make a law that says that every American in the United States has to have a monkey. And then the person with the red X here is saying, hey, wait a minute. That's not a good law. That doesn't make sense to me. So he has the ability to check this person with the green to make sure that they are balanced here. Right now, they're not balanced, which means that this person with the green check mark has all of the power. But this person with the red X is saying, no, you don't have all of that power. So he's going to check the person with the green here. So let's see how that works with our government. When we talk about our three branches, remember that we have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. We have our three branches of government here. And if you notice on this diagram here, we have a lot of arrows that are going to and from each of our branches of government. These represent the system of checks and balances that are in place to make sure that one branch of government doesn't become too powerful. So let's talk about that legislative branch for a minute. So again, let's say that the legislative branch creates a law and says that every American has to have a monkey. Well, that just seems like a silly law. So what the executive branch has the power to do, the president has the power to veto that legislation. When you veto something, it means to cancel or say no to. We really only use it when we talk about government or when we talk about a ruling body. So what we're seeing is that the executive branch is saying no to that legislative branch. They're keeping the legislative branch from becoming too powerful. But it works the opposite way as well, because if you notice this arrow going from the legislative to the executive, the legislative branch has the power to impeach the president. Now, this was in the news pretty recently when President Trump was impeached. We kind of think about it as a way of kicking someone out of their public office, but that's not really what it means. When you impeach someone, when you impeach the president in this case, it means that we are accusing them of doing something wrong, of not holding the office of president to the highest ability. We're saying that they did something that we don't believe in. So you probably heard this word a lot recently, and it's something that the legislative branch can do to check the executive branch, to keep the executive branch from becoming too powerful. Now, if you notice, there are also arrows that go from the legislative to judicial, and judicial to executive. What that means is that each branch of government has the ability to do something to keep the other branches in check, to keep them from having too much power. So let's look at the judicial branch here for a minute. The judicial branch has the power to declare a law unconstitutional. That's their check on the legislative branch. If that legislative branch makes that rule that says everyone has to own a monkey, and somehow the president okays it, it's the job of the judicial branch to say that, hey, no, that law does not match the Constitution of the United States, so we're not going to keep it. They're going to declare that law unconstitutional. The judicial branch also has the power to declare a presidential act unconstitutional. So if the president decides to do something or to pass an executive order, the judicial branch can check the executive branch by saying, that's not constitutional, you're not allowed to do that. And that's the judicial branch's way of saying that these two branches do not have ultimate power. But how about the other way? Well, the legislative branch has the ability to impeach a judge. We just talked about what impeach means. It's not something that just happens to the president. Let's say a Supreme Court judge or justice does something that is wrong. The legislative branch also has that ability to impeach the judges, to say that, hey, you've done something wrong. We don't like that. How about the executive branch? Well, the executive branch and the judicial branch have this relationship right here. The executive branch has the ability to nominate judges. So this has happened a couple of times in the last 4 years. It's happened twice. We have had 2 new Supreme Court judges that were nominated by the executive branch by President Trump, and they are nominated to that judicial branch. That's one of the ways that we can keep that judicial branch under control, is by allowing certain people to become judges. So what we're noticing here is that all of these branches have specific checks. It's their specific way of keeping the other branches of government in line and making sure that they don't become too powerful. Because if one branch of government becomes too powerful, then what we end up with is basically a monarchy, where one person or one group is the only person or group in charge of the government. And that's not the whole design and purpose of the American government. It was designed so that no one person can be in power. So when we talk about what we have gone over today, we have a lot of information that we can fill in on our KWL for what I have learned. We have talked about the 3 branches of government: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. We've talked about the fact that the legislative branch, their goal is to create the laws. We've talked about that the executive branch, their goal is to carry out the laws and enact the laws. And we've talked about how the judicial branch's goal is to evaluate the laws and decide whether or not they're constitutional. We've also talked about how our branches of government work together with a system of checks and balances to make sure that no one branch of government becomes too powerful. So this week you have 2 homework assignments. So this is my classroom set up on Google. When you go to classwork, when we look at July 20th through 24th, that's our week right here, your first assignment is already posted. It is your close reading activity for the day. So our activity here is learning more about the 3 branches of government and being a close, careful reader. So you are going to watch a quick 3-minute video and answer some questions. And then you have a quick 2-page reading that also has some questions to go with it. There are 10 questions that we're going to be answering today. On Thursday, there is going to be a compare and contrast activity that is specifically focusing on Congress. So when we looked at our legislative branch, we noticed that there are 2 parts of Congress, right? The House of Representatives and the Senate. Even though they both make up Congress, they are both different parts of Congress, and they do very specific things. So it's going to be your job to learn a little bit more about the House of Representatives and the Senate and talk about the similarities and differences that are there. So today's lesson is a close reading assignment, which is already posted on the Google Classroom. Thursday's assignment will be about comparing and contrasting the House of Representatives to the Senate. All right, everybody. Remember that if you have questions, feel free to call me or email me or send me a remind message. Good luck with your homework, and I will talk to you soon. All right. Bye, everybody.